Well, hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Tarvin, and I am a humor engineer. It's not a job that I applied for, and it's not a degree that I got from a university. In fact, if you Google humor engineer, all you really get are jokes about engineers. You get a lot of jokes about engineers. You get the classic jokes like an optimist says the glass is half full, a pessimist says the glass is half empty, an engineer says the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. Right? But buried on page 6 of Google results is me, because that is how I define myself, as a humor engineer. I go around and I work with organizations and individuals and teach them how to be more effective by using humor in the workplace. And I've learned over time that definitions are very important. Because my grandmother, who is 83 years old, has started texting me recently. 83 years old, and I will tell you that it is adorable. Her first message to me was, "Dear Andrew, trying out texting, love, your grandma." It's like, aw, she thinks it's a letter. So I sent her a message back. I was like, "Hey, Grandma, you don't have to include all that stuff." Her response was, "Dear Andrew, okay, love, your grandma." And my favorite part is that it's always love, your grandma. Like if it was love, grandma, I'd be confused. And she was like, "Dear Andrew, have a good time in California, love, grandma." I'd be like, "Grandma? Whose grandma? My grandma? Your grandma? A creepy dude named Grandma?" Right? But I was in France last year working with a couple of organizations and leading some humor workshops. And when I got back, I sent a text to my grandmother. I was like, "Hey, Grandma, just got back from France." Her response was, "Dear Andrew, France, ? WTF?" Right? So I called my grandmother up and I was like, "Grandma, what do you think WTF means?" And she was like, "Oh, well, someone at Bridge told me it means, well, that's fun." It's like, yes, that is exactly what it means, right? Because I'm not going to explain that one to my grandmother. So I've learned that definitions are very important because perception becomes reality. And so I learned this as well. I met this gentleman in Switzerland. We were both speaking on the same event. And this is Kevin Richardson, also known as the Lion Whisperer. Like, if you've ever seen that YouTube video of a lion hugging a dude, that's this guy, right? Basically, he raises lions from when they're really young. They treat him as one of the pride, and that's the work that he does, right? The Lion Whisperer. He and I were talking before the event. He learned that I did stand-up comedy. He's like, "Oh, I could never do that. It's too scary." I was like, "You live with lions." Right? But his perception was that he couldn't do something like comedy. But the reality is that things like humor, things like comedy, they are skills, which means they can be learned. And I know this is true because I am someone who has had to learn how to use comedy. I have spoken now in all 50 states. I've done over 1,000 shows as a stand-up comedian, as a poet, a spoken word artist, a storyteller, an improviser. My next goal is to try to hit all the continents, right? I've spoken in 15 countries and on 3 continents. And when I recently went to my high school reunion and people found out that I did comedy, they said, "But you're not funny." And in many ways, they were right, because I can tell you that this is not the face of funny. Right? There's a lot that's funny about this picture. None of it is intentional. Right? I had the blonde frosted tips up top. I had the clothes that were too baggy for me. The theme is into a dream. I am no one's dream in this picture. Right? Because growing up, I was never the life of the party or the class clown. In fact, I'm very much an introvert. If you know Myers-Briggs, I'm INTJ. If you know Star Wars, I'm R2-D2. But what I've learned is that we are not defined by our personality assessments, right? A personality assessment is just a single assessment at a single point in time. And instead, we are defined by our actions. And so if we act as a humorist, we are, in fact, a humorist. And that's what happened to me. Because I will tell you that I am very much an engineer, right? I've always been obsessed with efficiency ever since I can remember, really since before I can remember, because I was born 3 weeks early. So apparently, even in the womb, I was like, I don't need a full 9 months. I'm ready to go right now. Right, let's do this, Mom. That's not how I was born, right? But obsessed with efficiency. So I went to The Ohio State University and got a degree in computer science and engineering. And my definition of success, my dream was to work at a large company, rise through the ranks. But while I was at P&G, my best friend wanted to start an improv comedy group. He needed people and he forced me to join. And as you can probably tell from this picture, we were not very good. At least to start, because we had no idea what we were doing. We watched Whose Line Is It Anyway and then tried to repeat what we saw. But we realized that with practice and repetition, we got better and we grew. And it changed my definition of what I wanted to do. So I ultimately graduated from Ohio State and went on to Procter & Gamble, where I worked as a project manager. But along the way, I started to incorporate humor into what I did. And eventually, I proclaimed myself the corporate humorist of P&G. And I assumed that eventually someone would come and stop me, right? I assumed someone from HR or legal would come up and say, hey, you can't just create your own job title. But no one ever did. Instead, people started referring to me as the corporate humorist. And so I incorporated humor into my work at P&G and then later started my own company, Humor That Works, and started doing that part-time and then later full-time. And I defined a new career for myself. And again, these definitions are very important. So in fact, I want to do a quick exercise with all of you here now because we just had lunch a little while ago. Our glycemic index is starting to drop a little bit. So I want to add a little bit of interactivity and also allow you to get to know the people next to you. So what I want you to do is I want you to turn to the person next to you, where you're going to pair up with the person next to you. And in your pair, quickly determine who has longer hair. And that person raised their hand. Determine who has longer hair. That person raised their hand. Excellent. So, listen up. What's going to happen is the person with longer hair is going to be person A. And person A is going to make up a word that does not exist in any language. All right, so person A is going to make up a word that doesn't exist in any language. So, for example, person A might say something like smeardy. You might say something smeardy, right? I don't think that exists in any language. Person B is going to repeat that word, smeardy, and then give the definition of that word, right? So smeardy is, it's a rapper from the Smurf Kingdom, right? If you know the Smurf world, there's a rapper there named Smeardy. That's my definition of smeardy, right? Then person B is going to make up a word that does not exist in any language. Person A will repeat that word and give the definition, and you'll basically alternate back and forth until I tell you to stop. Does that make sense? Great. Now, one quick caveat for when you are defining the word, so I'll give you this tip. These words do not exist in any language. So no matter what you say, it's 100% correct. All right, so just keep that in mind as you're saying these things. All right, so go ahead, turn to the person next to you and begin the definition. Go ahead and begin. All right, excellent. So we're going to stop right there. We're going to stop right there and clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. All right, excellent. So I'm curious, how was the exercise? Easy, hard, fun, dumb, all of the above? All of it? It was kind of fun, right? Kind of challenging. I love this exercise. So out of curiosity, how many people thought that it was harder to make up the word? How many people thought it was harder to make up the word? Okay. How many people thought it was harder to give the definition? Okay, all right, right, a split among the group. I find this exercise fascinating because it's a little bit of an insight into the creative process, right? Because for those of us who struggle to make up the word, a lot of times it's because we suffer from the paradox of choice, right? Great TED talk by Barry Schwartz called The Paradox of Choice, which basically says that we as humans become paralyzed by too many options. In sales, they say a confused mind says no, right? We become paralyzed by too many options. So the way that we can get around that to be more creative is we can find our inspiration. In improvisation, we get a suggestion from the audience, and then we follow a very specific form. We follow a framework, whether it's short-form games or a long-form structure. So in this exercise, my framework, my inspiration is that I take words that actually exist and then try to make them backwards, right? So smeardy is just dreams backwards, right? And it works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're like, flipper, yeah. Nope, real word, right? Doesn't count, right? But it often works. It gives us an area to go. For those of us that struggle with the definition, a lot of times it's because we have filters in our head or we make assumptions that don't actually exist. Because even hearing a word that doesn't mean anything, right, a made-up word, you a lot of times have an initial thought. But sometimes we're like, oh, that thought isn't original enough, or it's not funny enough, or it doesn't sound like it's connected to the real word enough. But in this exercise, you could pre-plan your definition and it would still work, right? Any definition is going to work because the words do not exist in any language, right? So again, you want to look to see, can I remove these filters? Can I check the assumptions about this particular, say, word in this case? The other thing about this exercise is about confidence. Did someone have in their group, like they're pairing someone that was like good at this? Like that seemed really good, right? And when you think about what makes someone good at this exercise, a lot of times we think of things like, oh, they were quick, right? They were witty. They didn't pause. And we think, oh, they were confident. But how do we know they were confident? Right? It's because how they say things and the way that they stand. But when we're out creating new things, when we're defining a new word or creating new jobs or starting a new company, how can we be confident if we've never done it before? Well, that's where it can help with Amy Cuddy's research, right? Phenomenal TED Talk by Amy Cuddy on the power of body language, where holding a power pose for just 120 seconds can increase the testosterone in our body and decrease the cortisol, right? And that's not to say go and do this and everything that's nerve-wracking to you. Right? It's not like go into an interview and be like, I will not sit down, I'm being confident right now. But instead, change your body language and change your perception. Because here's the reality. Your name is your made-up word. Right? I'll say that again. Your name, your job title, your company is your made-up word for you to define. Right? And that means you need to find the inspiration for yourself, whether that's something that you're passionate about, the role that you're in now, a problem that you feel needs to be solved, is your inspiration. The framework is how you create it. And check your assumptions, right? What does it actually mean to be creative or an entrepreneur or someone who's leading change in what we do? And go out and be confident in whatever it is that you do. Because I've defined the word humor engineer. I've defined it as someone who uses humor to help people to be more effective. And I've defined my lifestyle of traveling all the way around the world to work with individual people. Right? Because I want people to meet me. When people meet me, I want them to hear about what I do, and I want them to think, WTF. Right? Well, that's fun. I've been Andrew Tarvin. You guys have been great. Thank you very much.